The dry Idaho wind sent dust swirling through Boise City. It was the summer of 1884. Mei Lin stood alone on the porch of a boarding house, wearing a red silk jacket and skirt sewn in the Cantonese style. Her arms were folded tightly across her chest. Against the brown frontier town, she looked impossible to ignore, and that was exactly what frightened her. She was waiting for a man she had never met, not knowing whether he would offer her a home or simply another kind of cage. Years earlier, Mei Lin had come to San Francisco with her father, before new laws made life even harder for Chinese women in America. Now, her sister, Su Yin, had arranged a meeting with a widowed rancher in Idaho. The Chinese Exclusion Act had been law for 2 years. Anti-Chinese notices appeared in store windows and on fence posts. Mei Lin had learned to keep her eyes lowered and her voice quiet, but she had not crossed mountains and deserts to disappear. Heavy boots stopped in front of her. "Your sister sent me," a low voice said. Mei Lin looked up. The man before her was tall and weathered, with dark hair touched by gray and clear blue eyes that held neither mockery nor pity. He removed his hat and leaned closer so only she could hear him. "I hear you need a husband."
The words made her breath catch. "My name is Caleb Sterling," he said. "I have a ranch 3 miles from town." Mei Lin studied his rough hands. "You are the cowboy?" A tired smile touched his face. "I reckon I am." Then his expression softened. "I also have a little girl. Her name is Lily. She lost her mother 3 winters ago." Mei Lin looked down at the red silk gathered in her hands. "I do not know how to be a mother." Caleb nodded slowly. "I do not know how to be a father." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he held out his hand, palm up. "You do not owe me anything," he said. "But if you want to see the ranch, the wagon is this way." He led her toward a simple wooden wagon.
It was hitched to 2 sturdy brown horses. In the back of the wagon sat a small girl. She had Caleb's startling blue eyes. She had tangled, sun-bleached blonde hair. She was wearing a dusty pinafore. She was clutching a headless rag doll to her chest. Lily looked at Mei Lin with wide, uncertain eyes. Then her tiny finger reached for the red silk. It trembled as it touched the fabric. Mei Lin's throat tightened. No one had looked at her with wonder in years. The little girl was just as lonely as she was. "Soft," Lily whispered. Mei Lin gave her a small smile. "Yes," she said, "very soft." Caleb helped Mei Lin up onto the high seat. He climbed up beside her and flicked the reins. The wagon creaked into motion, the wheels groaning. They left the noise and the judgment of Boise City behind.
The road was bumpy. The air was thick with the scent of sagebrush. Mei Lin felt the eyes of the townspeople on her back. She knew they were whispering. A white man with a Chinese bride was a scandal in 1884. It was a sight that sparked anger in the hearts of the narrow-minded. But Caleb did not look back. He kept his eyes fixed on the horizon. He drove as if they were the only 3 people left in the world. "It isn't a palace," Caleb said after a long, heavy silence. "But it's honest. I built it myself after my Sarah passed." Mei Lin heard the slight catch in his voice. It was the sound of a wound that hadn't quite healed. "Sarah," Mei Lin repeated softly. The name felt sacred. "She was a good woman," Caleb said. "The fever took her 3 winters ago. Lily doesn't remember her much. That's the hardest part, I think."
The ranch appeared as they rounded a sharp bend in the river. It was a small cabin made of notched locks. There was a barn. There was a corral with a few lowing cows. The mountains rose up behind it, purple and majestic. The air here smelled different than the town. It was clean. It was sharp with the scent of wild sage and freedom. Caleb stopped the wagon in front of the cabin. He hopped down and walked around to help her. He steadied her as she climbed down from the wagon. Then he stepped back at once, giving her space. He smelled of wood smoke, cedar, and the open country. "Welcome home, Mei Lin," he said. His voice was a low rumble in his chest. He went to the back of the wagon and lifted Lily out. The little girl ran into the cabin without a word. Mei Lin followed slowly, her heart heavy with the unknown. The interior was dark and cool. There was a large stone fireplace.
There was a heavy wooden table, scarred by use. It was a man's house. It was a house built for survival, not for beauty. There were no curtains on the windows. There were no flowers on the table. The floor was swept, but the corners were haunted by dust. Mei Lin looked at the small kitchen area. There were iron pots. There was a heavy sack of flour. "I'll bring your trunk in," Caleb said. He moved with a quiet, practiced efficiency. Mei Lin stood in the middle of the room. She felt like an intruder in a dead woman's life. She felt like a bright bird trapped in a wooden cage. But then Lily came up to her. The girl tugged on her red silk skirt. "Are you a princess?" Lily asked. Her voice was small and full of wonder. Mei Lin knelt down. She made sure she was at Lily's eye level.
"No, Lily," she said gently. "I am just Mei Lin. Why is your dress so red? In my home, red is for luck. Red is for happiness." Lily processed this for a long moment. She looked around the dim, quiet cabin. "Do we have luck now?" she asked. Mei Lin felt a lump form in her throat. She looked up as Caleb walked in with her heavy trunk. He paused in the doorway, watching the two of them. The golden evening light framed his silhouette. "I reckon we have a bit more than we did yesterday," Caleb said. His voice was thick with an emotion he couldn't quite hide. The first weeks were not easy. Mei Lin burned 2 loaves of bread in Caleb's cast-iron stove. Lily refused to taste the first meal Mei Lin cooked with ginger and soy. Caleb ate every bite anyway, even when the spices made his eyes water. "It is different," he said, "but it is good."
At night, Mei Lin mended his shirts by the fire. Inside the collar of one work shirt, she stitched a tiny red flower no one else would ever see. Caleb found it days later. He said nothing, but the next morning he left a small bundle of wildflowers beside her teacup. And before that first winter ended, the town that watched Mei Lin arrive would try to make her leave. By November, the bright Idaho days had grown short and sharp with cold. One day, the weather turned vicious. A sudden, violent storm blew down from the peaks. The wind howled through the cracks in the logs. It sounded like a pack of ghosts. Lily woke up in the middle of the night. She had a barking, terrifying cough. Her face was flushed a deep, feverish red. Caleb was frantic. He was a man who could face a mountain lion, but he was helpless against a fever. He paced the floor, his hands shaking. "Sarah died of the fever," he whispered. His voice was trembling with a primal terror. "I can't lose her, Mei Lin."
"I can't lose my baby girl." Mei Lin pushed him aside gently. Her hands were steady. "I help," she said. On the voyage to San Francisco, Mei Lin had once helped an older woman through a long night of sickness. She had learned that fear could wait. A suffering child could not. She went to her trunk. She pulled out a small leather pouch. It held a few dried herbs her grandmother had taught her to use, along with tea leaves she had saved for emergencies. She boiled water. She made a bitter-smelling, potent tea. She soaked a cloth in cool water and placed it on Lily's burning forehead. She sat by the child's bed all night long. She did not move. She sang low, melodic songs in her native tongue. The sounds were ancient and soothing. Caleb sat in the chair by the fire, watching her. He saw the way she cradled Lily's head. He saw the infinite patience in her dark eyes. He saw a strength that had nothing to do with muscles. By morning, the fever had broken. Caleb lowered his head beside Lily's bed. For a long moment, he could not speak. Then, Lily reached for Mei Lin's hand before she reached for his. That was when Caleb understood what had changed inside his home. The sweat was cool on Lily's brow. The girl opened her eyes and smiled weakly. "Mei Lin," she whispered. "I am here, little one," Mei Lin said. She brushed a stray hair from the girl's face. Caleb stood up and walked to the bed. He looked at Mei Lin with an expression she couldn't name. It was more than gratitude. It was the beginning of a bond that transcended contracts. He reached out. He touched Mei Lin's shoulder. His hand was heavy and warm. "You saved her," he said. "We are a family now," Mei Lin replied. She realized then that she meant it with her whole heart. She wasn't just a mail-order bride anymore. She was the soul of this house. She was the shield for this child. Mei Lin had come to Idaho believing she was only passing through someone else's life. But Lily had called for her in the dark, and Caleb had watched her stay. If this story of courage and finding home touches your heart, please subscribe. And tell us in the comments, have you ever found kindness when you needed it most? Now, the world outside the ranch was not so kind. The peace was shattered a few days later. Caleb had to go into Boise for winter supplies. He decided to take Mei Lin and Lily with him. "You need a proper coat," Caleb said, looking at the leaden sky. "The Idaho winter is a killer. Silk won't hold back the frost." Mei Lin felt a cold knot of dread in her stomach. She remembered the way the town looked at her. She remembered the whispers. But she trusted Caleb. She trusted the man who had sat by her while she saved his daughter. They arrived in town on a Tuesday morning. The streets were busy with miners and merchants. Caleb led them into the general store. The bell above the door chimed with a cheerful sound, but the chatter inside stopped instantly. The silence was deafening. The storekeeper was a man named Miller. He had a thick mustache and eyes like cold flint. He leaned over the counter, his face darkening. "Morning, Caleb," Miller said. His voice was like ice cracking. "Morning, Mr. Miller," Caleb replied. His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. "I need a sack of grain. I need coffee. And I need the finest wool coat you have for my wife." The word wife echoed against the wooden walls. A woman standing nearby gasped.
She whispered to her friend and pointed a gloved finger at Mei Lin. "We don't sell to her kind, Caleb," Miller said. He spat on the floor. The tobacco juice landed inches from Mei Lin's feet. Mei Lin felt the blood drain from her face. She felt the old familiar shame burning in her chest. She instinctively moved to step behind Caleb, but Lily gripped Mei Lin's hand tightly. The little girl didn't move. Caleb's jaw tightened until it looked like granite. His hands clenched into massive fists at his sides. "She is my wife, Miller," Caleb said. His voice was a low, dangerous growl. "She is under my roof, Miller. She will be treated with respect. I don't care about your ignorant rules. Sell me the coat, or I will buy what my family needs somewhere else." "Then start walking," Miller sneered. "We don't want your kind here if you're bringing a China woman into a white man's store." The room was suffocating. The air was thick with a hatred that felt like a physical weight. Mei Lin wanted to disappear into the floorboards. She wanted to run back to the wagon and hide. But then she felt Caleb's hand on her back. It was a solid, protective heat. "Come on, Mei Lin," Caleb said softly. "We're leaving." They walked out of the store with their heads held high. But the ordeal wasn't over. As they reached the wagon, a group of men blocked their path. They were rough-looking men. They were miners with dirt under their nails and whiskey on their breath. "Think you're better than us, Sterling?" one of them shouted. "Bringing that woman into our town like she belongs? It's a disgrace to the memory of your first wife." That was the line that broke the silence. Caleb pushed Mei Lin and Lily behind him. He stood like a stone wall between his family and the mob. "Leave my family alone," Caleb growled. It was the sound of a predator protecting its young. "Or what?" the man challenged. He raised a fist, egged on by the crowd. Caleb did not reach for a weapon. He only stepped closer, keeping Mei Lin and Lily safely behind him. "I have seen enough hatred in my life," he said quietly. "I will not bring it into my home." The men looked at one another. For the first time, they saw that Caleb was not trying to impress anyone. He was simply refusing to abandon his family. The men muttered among themselves. An older miner near the edge of the crowd lowered his eyes first. Then another man stepped aside. No one apologized, but no one touched Mei Lin or Lily. Slowly, a path opened to the wagon. Caleb helped Mei Lin and Lily into the wagon. He climbed up and drove away. He didn't look back once. They were halfway home before anyone dared to speak. "I am sorry," Mei Lin whispered. Tears were streaming down her face, hot and bitter. Because of me, you have trouble. Because of me, your friends hate you. Caleb stopped the wagon under a massive cottonwood tree. He turned to her. He took both of her small hands in his massive ones. "Listen to me, Mei Lin," he said. "Those men are not my friends. They are cowards who fear anything they cannot control. You did not bring trouble into my life, Mei Lin." He held her hands more tightly. "You brought warmth back into a house that had forgotten how to feel warm." He looked toward Lily in the wagon. "She laughed again because of you." Then his voice broke. "And I remembered how to hope." Mei Lin looked at him through her tears. She saw the absolute truth in his sky-blue eyes. He wasn't protecting her because of a contract. He wasn't protecting her out of obligation.
He was protecting her because he loved her. And in that moment, Mei Lin realized she loved him too. She loved the way his hands were both strong and gentle. She loved the way he tucked Lily into bed every night. She loved the way he made her feel like she had a place in this world. "We go home now," she said, wiping her eyes. "Yes," Caleb said. "We go home." The winter was long and brutal. Snowdrifts rose high against the lower windows of the cabin. But inside, the air was warm and smelled of spice. Mei Lin had learned to cook the hearty stews Caleb needed. She had taught Lily how to speak words of her language. The little girl would run through the house calling the cat meow, the Cantonese word for cat. It made Caleb laugh. That sound was the true music of the house. But life on the frontier is never a fairy tale. In late January, a pack of gray wolves began harassing the cattle. They were starving. They were desperate. One night, the sound of a calf screaming tore through the silence. Caleb grabbed his rifle. He ran out into the screaming white blizzard. Mei Lin watched from the window, her heart in her throat. She saw the orange flashes of the rifle in the dark. She heard the snarling of the beasts. Caleb returned an hour later, badly hurt and shaking from the cold. Mei Lin saw at once that he needed careful tending. She guided him to the fire. Then she worked through the night with boiled water, clean cloth, and the small pouch of herbs she had saved. For days, she barely left his side. When pain and fever pulled him into restless sleep, she told him stories from her childhood. She told him about distant mountains, lantern festivals, and dragons in the clouds. Lily carried wood to the fire and sat quietly beside them. The little girl had once been cared for by Mei Lin. Now she tried, in her small way, to care for them both. One morning, Caleb finally woke up. His eyes were clear again. The worst of the fever had passed. He looked at Mei Lin. She was slumped in the chair beside him, fast asleep. She looked exhausted. Her red silk dress was marked with ash from the long nights beside the fire. Caleb reached out and touched her hand. She woke up instantly, her eyes searching his face for a sign of the end. "You're back," she breathed. "I'm back," he said, his voice cracking. "Thank you, Mei Lin. You've given me my life twice now." When spring came, not everyone in the valley had changed. Some men still looked away when Mei Lin passed. Some doors remained closed. But a few women began to visit the ranch. First came Mrs. Harper with plum jam. Then came a widow named Ruth with garden seeds. They saw Lily laughing again. They saw Caleb listening when Mei Lin spoke. They did not suddenly forget the prejudice they had been taught, but they began to question it. And that was how the first cracks appeared in the wall around Mei Lin's life. On a bright golden afternoon in April, Caleb took Mei Lin to the porch. The wildflowers were blooming on the hillsides. The air was sweet with the scent of new life. Caleb reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small gold band. It was simple. It was worn thin by time. "This was my mother's," he said. "I didn't give it to you before because I didn't want to rush you. I wanted you to choose this life. I didn't want you to just accept it because you were afraid." He took her hand. "Mei Lin, I know this territory may never recognize what we are." He opened his hand and showed her his mother's ring. "But I do.
I am not asking you to stay because you are afraid. I am asking whether you will choose a life with Lily and me. Will you let us choose you too?" Mei Lin felt the tears of pure happiness rising.
She looked at Lily playing in the dirt. She looked at the cabin she had turned into a sanctuary. She looked at the man who had stood between her and the world. "Yes, Caleb," she said. "I choose you." He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit as if it had been made for her. A week later, a circuit rider came to the ranch. He could not give them the legal marriage that Idaho law denied them. But beneath the wide blue sky, he offered a quiet blessing for the family they had chosen. Lily stood between them, holding both their hands. The law might refuse to write their names side by side, but no law could undo the home they had built. Mei Lin had found more than safety. She had found a child who trusted her. She had found a man who saw her strength before he saw her differences. And Caleb had found more than someone to care for his daughter. He had found a partner who taught his home how to live again. As the sun settled behind the Idaho mountains, Mei Lin's red silk moved softly in the evening wind. It was still the color of luck.
But now it was also the color of courage. For the first time in her life, Mei Lin was no longer waiting for a stranger to decide her future. She was home. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe for more timeless Western love stories. And tell us in the comments, do you believe home is a place or the people who choose to stand beside you?